The phone rang just as I was tucking Edgar, my orange tabby, into his favorite sunlit spot by the window. It was a lazy Wednesday afternoon in Beacon Hill, and the world outside felt distant, like it always did when I was lost in my books or my garden. But that call shattered the quiet. Sebastian's name flashed on the screen and my heart sank before I even answered. "Here we go again," I muttered under my breath, bracing myself for what I already knew was coming. "Mom, I need your help." His voice was clipped, almost mechanical, like he'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times. He didn't ask how I was doing or if I'd been sleeping well. No pleasantries, just straight to the point. "I've got this opportunity, but I'm short on funds. Just a few thousand, to get things rolling." I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of the counter. This wasn't new. Over the years, Sebastian had bled me dry with his endless schemes and promises that never amounted to anything. But this time something inside me snapped. "No, Sebastian," I said firmly, surprising even myself. There was a long pause on the other end and then his voice turned icy. "Fine. Have it your way." After hanging up, I stared at the phone for what felt like an eternity. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what I'd just done. Saying no to Sebastian felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing where I'd land. I tried to shake it off, burying myself in mundane tasks, watering the begonias, dusting the bookshelves, but the tension lingered. By evening, Maggie showed up unannounced, her sharp blue eyes narrowing as soon as she saw my face. "What's wrong, Ellie?" she asked, setting down the casserole she'd brought over. I told her everything: the call, the demand, my refusal, and Sebastian's venomous response. Maggie listened intently, her lips pressed into a thin line. When I finished, she sighed heavily. "Ellie, sweetheart, you did the right thing. He's been taking advantage of you for years, and it's about time someone drew a line. But don't think for a second he's going to let this go easily." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Maggie had always been my rock, but tonight, even her usual confidence couldn't fully reassure me. As she left, I locked the door behind her and sat alone in the dim light, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. A week passed and the silence from Sebastian was deafening. Normally he'd bombard me with calls or texts until I caved, but this time nothing. At first I convinced myself it was a good sign, he was finally learning independence. Then one morning I opened the local paper to find a scathing letter to the editor written by none other than my own son. In it he painted me as some kind of miserly tyrant who hoarded wealth while refusing to lift a finger to help her struggling child. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering against the tiled floor. How could he twist the truth so cruelly? Dr. Julian Hartman, my neighbor and occasional chess partner, found me sitting on the porch later that day, staring blankly at the garden. He must have noticed the dark circles under my eyes because he didn't waste time with small talk. "Ellie, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's troubling you?" I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to burden him with my family drama, but eventually, I handed him the crumpled newspaper clipping. He read it slowly, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. "This is character assassination, plain and simple," he said finally. "But you can't let guilt dictate your actions. Stand firm, Ellie. You owe him nothing." 2 days later, Sebastian showed up at my doorstep unannounced, a rare occurrence since he preferred texting or calling from afar. His face was flushed, and the faint smell of alcohol clung to him as he pushed past me into the house. "You really think you're better than me, don't you?" he spat, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "All those years, Dad gave you everything, and now you sit here acting like you're some saint." I stood frozen, clutching the back of a chair for support. His words stung, not because they were true but because they revealed the depth of his resentment. "You have no idea what you're talking about," I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. "Your father worked himself to the bone for this family, and yes, maybe I made mistakes, but I never abandoned you." Sebastian laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Abandoned? You might as well have. All those times I needed you and all you cared about was your precious little routines. Well, guess what, Mom? You'll regret cutting me off. Mark my words." With that he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sank onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in years I questioned whether I'd ever truly known my own son. It started with a certified letter arriving in the mail, a formal summons notifying me of a lawsuit filed by Sebastian. According to the document, he was suing me for emotional distress and financial negligence, claiming I'd failed to provide adequate support during critical periods of his life. I nearly dropped the papers in shock. How could he accuse me of such things? Memories flooded back. Late-night conversations, birthday gifts, tuition payments, all the ways I'd tried to be there for him despite our differences. And yet here we were. Maggie accompanied me to meet with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Monroe. She assured me that Sebastian's case was weak, but the legal battle would still be draining, emotionally and financially. "We'll fight fire with fire," Patricia said confidently. "If he wants to play dirty, we'll expose his skeletons too." Though part of me recoiled at the idea of dragging our private lives through the mud, another part, the part that had endured years of manipulation, was ready to fight back. For once I wasn't going to roll over and take it. That night I couldn't sleep. The house felt suffocating, every corner whispering reminders of Sebastian's betrayal. Finally, I wandered into the attic where dusty photo albums lined the shelves. Flipping through them, I saw snapshots of Sebastian as a boy, smiling, carefree, innocent. None of that remained now. The man he'd become was a stranger, someone I barely recognized. Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and consuming. Without thinking, I grabbed a box of matches from the kitchen and carried the albums downstairs. In the backyard, under the pale glow of the moon, I lit the first page on fire. The flames licked hungrily at the photographs, devouring memories I'd cherished for decades. Each flicker felt like a release, a way to purge the pain he'd caused. But as the smoke curled upward, doubt crept in. Was I destroying more than just pictures? Was I erasing the last remnants of the bond we once shared? Before I could reconsider, Maggie appeared at the gate, her expression horrified. "Ellie, stop," she shouted, rushing toward me. "This isn't the answer." She pulled me away, extinguishing the flames with a bucket of water. As we stood amidst the charred remains, I realized she was right, but it was too late. The damage was done. The next morning, I woke up with a resolve that startled even myself. Maggie had stayed the night, sleeping on the couch while I tossed and turned upstairs. When she found me in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea and staring out the window, she sighed. "Ellie, you can't keep doing this to yourself," she said gently. But I wasn't listening, not really. My mind was already racing ahead, plotting my next move. Sebastian wanted to play dirty? Fine. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Maggie raised an eyebrow when I told her my plan. "You're going to dig up dirt on your own son?" she asked incredulously. "Ellie, this isn't some thriller novel. This is real life." I nodded, ignoring the tremor in my hands as I flipped through old emails and documents on my laptop. "He started this war," I said firmly. "And if he wants to drag our family name through the mud, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with." Maggie didn't approve, she thought it would only escalate things, but she agreed to help anyway. After all, she'd always been better at tech than I was. It took weeks, but eventually we uncovered something damning. Proof that Sebastian had embezzled funds from one of his failed businesses years ago. There were emails, bank statements, even testimonies from former employees who'd been burned by his schemes. At first I hesitated. Exposing these secrets would ruin him publicly, and permanently. But every time I thought about backing down, I remembered the lawsuit, the lies, the way he'd painted me as some heartless monster. So, one late-night session later, I sent everything anonymously to a journalist friend of Maggie's. The story broke 2 days later. Headlines screamed about Sebastian Hawthorne's shady dealings, and social media exploded with outrage. People I hadn't heard from in years reached out, offering condolences or simply congratulating me on finally standing up to him. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Justice, or at least my version of it, had been served. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. Sebastian retaliated within hours. By midday, screenshots of private messages between me and my late husband began circulating online. In them, I vented about how overwhelmed I felt raising Sebastian alone after his father died. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I'd written once. "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear." Seeing those words splashed across Twitter and Reddit made me sick to my stomach. Strangers dissected my grief, calling me selfish and unfit. Friends stopped returning my calls. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. Even Dr. Hartman seemed distant when I ran into him at the grocery store. That night, I sat in the dark, clutching Edgar close as tears streamed down my face. Had I deserved this? Maybe. But the weight of public humiliation was crushing. Maggie tried to reassure me, reminding me that people would forget eventually, but I knew better. Once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. And now, thanks to my own actions, I'd alienated not just my son but also the community I'd called home for decades. A week after the scandal erupted, Sebastian showed up unannounced again. This time there was no alcohol-fueled rage, just raw desperation. He looked thinner, his eyes hollow and shadowed. "Mom, please," he begged, sinking onto the couch without waiting for permission. "I messed up. I know I did. But I'm sorry. Can we just start over?" His voice cracked, and for a moment I almost believed him. Almost. But then I remembered the headlines, the hateful comments, the sleepless nights spent wondering if I'd done the right thing. "You brought this on yourself," I said coldly, folding my arms across my chest. "If you wanted a relationship, you should have treated me like a person instead of an ATM." His shoulders slumped, defeated. "You'll regret this," he whispered before leaving. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sank into a chair, trembling. Part of me hoped he was wrong, but another part feared he might be right. In the weeks that followed, Sebastian vanished from my life entirely. Rumors swirled that he'd fled the country to escape legal consequences, though I never confirmed it. Without his constant demands and accusations, my days grew quieter, but not peaceful. The house felt emptier than ever, and Edgar seemed to sense my unease, curling up beside me more often. Strangely, I missed the chaos Sebastian used to bring, even though it had driven me to the brink. Dr. Hartman stopped by one afternoon, bringing a pot of soup and a sympathetic smile. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling into the armchair across from me. I shrugged, stirring my tea absently. "Better, I suppose. At least he's not here, poisoning my peace." But as I said the words, they rang hollow. Winning this battle hadn't brought me the closure I'd expected. Instead, I felt adrift, like a ship lost at sea. Dr. Hartman studied me thoughtfully. "Ellie, revenge is rarely as satisfying as we imagine. What will you do now?" Now that the dust had settled, I tried to rebuild my life. I joined a book club, volunteered at the library where I'd once worked, and spent weekends gardening until my knees ached. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but beneath the facade, cracks were forming. Sleep eluded me most nights, and when I did drift off, nightmares plagued me. Sebastian haunted my dreams, screaming accusations or standing silently in judgment. Sometimes I woke up crying, unsure whether I mourned the loss of my son or the woman I used to be. Maggie noticed, of course. He always did. One evening, as we sipped wine on the porch, she leaned forward, her expression unusually serious. "Ellie, you need to talk to someone. A therapist, maybe. You've been carrying this burden alone for too long." I shook my head, brushing off her concern. "I'm fine," I insisted, though my voice wavered. "It's just adjustment." Maggie didn't press further, but her worried glance lingered long after she left. That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if she was right. Could I really heal without confronting the pain I'd caused and endured? Months passed and winter settled over Beacon Hill, blanketing the streets in snow. The holidays came and went, marked only by quiet dinners with Maggie and Dr. Hartman. For the first time in years, I skipped decorating the tree. It felt pointless without anyone to share it with. One particularly frosty morning, I received a letter in the mail. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting another salvo from Sebastian. Instead, I found a handwritten note. "Dear Mom, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I've made so many mistakes and I hate that I hurt you. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Love, Sebastian." Tears blurred the page as I read it over and over. For weeks, I debated whether to respond. Part of me yearned to reach out to bridge the gap between us, but fear held me back. What if he rejected me again? Or worse, what if he hadn't changed at all? In the end, I tucked the letter into a drawer and let silence answer for me. Spring arrived, bringing with it the promise of renewal, or so I told myself. The garden bloomed in vibrant bursts of color, and Edgar lounged contentedly in sunbeams that streamed through the windows. Yet despite the beauty surrounding me, my heart remained heavy. That letter from Sebastian lingered in my mind like an unspoken prayer. It wasn't perfect, it didn't erase the pain he'd caused, but it was something. Maybe even enough to start rebuilding. One afternoon, as I pruned roses in the backyard, Dr. Hartman appeared at the gate holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" he asked with a warm smile. We sat together on the bench overlooking the flower beds, sipping our drinks in companionable silence. Finally, I broke the quiet. Julian, do you think people can really change? He paused, considering the question. I think they can try, he said thoughtfully. But change requires effort from both sides. His words struck a chord. Was I willing to meet Sebastian halfway? Or had I already decided the answer was no? It was Maggie who first spotted him walking up the driveway one crisp May morning. She called me immediately, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ellie, your boy's here, she said softly. My stomach twisted as I peered out the window. There he stood, Sebastian, looking older, thinner, and somehow smaller than I remembered. He hesitated at the door, his hand raised to knock but frozen mid-air. For a moment neither of us moved. Then with trembling fingers I opened the door. Hi, Mom, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. He held out a bouquet of daisies, the same flowers he used to pick for me when he was little. I just wanted to see you. My throat tightened, making it hard to speak. After everything, after all the hurt and betrayal, here he was standing before me like a ghost from my past. Against every instinct screaming caution, I stepped aside and let him in. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken words. Sebastian fidgeted with the edge of his sleeve, avoiding my gaze. I know I messed up, he began haltingly. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I needed to say it, to tell you how sorry I am. His voice cracked, and for the first time I saw vulnerability in his eyes. Not the manipulative kind, but genuine regret. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind him of all the ways he'd broken my trust. But another part, a softer, wearier part, recognized the fragility of this moment. I'm not sure forgiveness is that simple, I admitted, my own voice shaky. You've done things I never thought you were capable of. And I've done things too. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I understand, he whispered. But maybe we could try? Over the next few weeks, Sebastian visited regularly, always careful not to overstay his welcome. Our conversations were tentative at first, tiptoeing around old wounds. Slowly, though, we began to find common ground again. Small moments of connection that reminded me of the boy he used to be. One evening, as we flipped through an old photo album, he pointed to a picture of us at the beach. Remember this? He asked, smiling faintly. You taught me how to skip stones. I remember, I replied, my chest tightening. You were terrible at it. He laughed, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like the years between us had melted away. But the scars remained, invisible yet ever-present. Each visit ended with a bittersweet ache, a reminder that healing takes time, and sometimes it doesn't fully happen at all. The headaches started subtly, dismissed as stress or fatigue. But when they grew persistent, I finally saw a doctor. The diagnosis hit like a freight train: early-stage dementia. Sitting in the sterile exam room, clutching the pamphlets and prescriptions, I felt the world tilt beneath me. How cruelly ironic, that just as I was beginning to reconnect with Sebastian, my mind might betray me entirely. When I told him, his face crumpled. Mom, there has to be something we can do, he said desperately. I shook my head, forcing a smile. This isn't your burden to carry, sweetheart. You've got your own life to live. But he refused to leave, insisting on staying with me during appointments and helping around the house. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to lean on him. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Still, the shadow of my diagnosis loomed large, casting doubt over whatever fragile peace we'd built. By autumn, my condition had worsened. Simple tasks became monumental challenges, and familiar faces started fading from memory. Sebastian stayed by my side, reading aloud from my favorite books and guiding me through daily routines. One evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, he took my hand. Mom, I love you, he said, his voice breaking. I always have. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I struggled to respond. I love you too, Sebastian, I managed, though the words felt distant, like echoes of someone else's voice. Days later, I slipped into a coma, surrounded by memories I could no longer grasp. Sebastian stayed by my bedside, holding my hand until the end. After I passed, Sebastian inherited the house and most of my belongings. To everyone's surprise, he donated nearly everything to charity, keeping only a few mementos: a photo album, a stack of letters, and my gardening tools. Friends and neighbors whispered about his transformation, marveling at how much he'd changed since those dark days of conflict. But Sebastian knew better than anyone. Change comes at a cost. In the attic, he discovered a box of cassette tapes labeled with dates spanning decades. Curious, he played one and was stunned to hear my voice, clear and steady, speaking directly to him. "If you're listening to this, Sebastian," I said, "it means I'm gone. I want you to know that I forgave you long ago, even if I couldn't always show it. Please forgive yourself too. Life is too short for regrets." Inspired by my final message, Sebastian dedicated himself to helping others. He volunteered at a community center, mentoring troubled youth and sharing stories of resilience and redemption. Though haunted by guilt and grief, he found purpose in honoring my legacy. On the anniversary of my death, he visited my grave, leaving a single rose and a note. "Thank you for teaching me what love truly means." Years later, Sebastian stood before a group of teenagers, recounting his journey from anger and resentment to forgiveness and growth. His voice wavered as he described the mother who had loved him fiercely, flaws and all. "She wasn't perfect," he admitted. "Neither am I. But she showed me that love endures, even when we fail." As he finished speaking, a young girl approached him, tears in her eyes. "My mom and I don't talk anymore," she confessed. "Do you think it's too late to fix things?" Sebastian smiled sadly, remembering the lessons I'd taught him. "It's never too late," he said. "But it starts with saying I'm sorry." Back home, Sebastian listened to the last tape I'd recorded. My voice filled the room, calm and reassuring. "Sebastian, wherever you are, I hope you found happiness. Remember, love isn't about perfection. It's about trying. Keep trying, sweetheart. That's all any of us can do." He sat in silence long after the recording ended, clutching the tape player tightly. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The screen fades to black as Sebastian walks through a park, scattering petals into the wind. The camera lingers on a plaque engraved with my name and a quote, "Love endures even when we fail." The credits roll, accompanied by soft piano music,